Well, hello again. Falling apart at the seams. Welcome to another episode of Artifacts. Now, what we're going to do today is we're starting off with the bare minimum. We are starting off for the very beginner, the absolute person who wants to start, or even those of you who are drawing, but there are certain things you probably haven't been discussed with about posture, tools, things like this that will actually help you in your work. They don't talk about it in school, nor do they even use the proper tools or tables for that matter. Come on, I'm going to show you some of the other stuff that we're going to work with on this episode of Artifacts. Well, this episode is going to be dedicated all to just posture and how posture is used. This is some of the bare minimums of the arts. A lot of things happen during the beginning stages of working in the arts. And we see that in school all the time. They don't teach you how to sit. They don't teach you about the certain supplies that you're using. As a matter of fact, the majority of you don't even realize what a pencil you're using. You're familiar with the B pencil. You're probably even familiar with an AB pencil. But there are different types of pencils, different styles that go from H all the way to B, and they're numbered. The other thing is posture in itself. I've seen students laying their head on the table while they're drawing, hunched over. These are bad habits, and you don't want to start working on those bad habits at all. There's basic things of understanding what type of paper, not just paper, but acid-free paper, acid paper, newsprint. I mean, there are different types of papers altogether and what to use and when to use them. Which is why it's so important that we are just going with just the basic minimum on this one episode. As I said earlier, Artifacts is going to be dedicated to just working on every single meticulous part of the arts, from the very, very basic to the most advanced. We've got a long way to go before we even get there. Why is posture important? Well, if those of you who are playing sports, it's like saying, well, I want to swim or I'm running track. Why is that important? I mean, it doesn't take a genius to figure that one out. You have to have the good form and technique in order to be able to perform the way you should perform. It's the same thing in the arts. If you're not going to have the proper posture and understanding what you're doing, your work is not going to come out. And not only that, you yourself, well, you're not going to be looking all that great within a few years. I have seen some artists, and I can tell they have not been using proper technique and proper posture. But in this episode, you'll get to understand how it works. I'm going to demonstrate to you how posture works, how you to keep your supplies sharp, the differences between using an X-Acto knife versus a pencil sharpener. Oh yeah, there's a difference between the two. Let me show you a few of those things. Let's talk about our tools. Many people think a pencil's a pencil. I use a pencil sharpener. It's okay. Well, in actuality, it's not. This is what the average pencil looks like. As you can see,
it looks sharp, but it's rather dull. Look at that tip. It's got a dull end to it. It doesn't really have a sharp point to that, which isn't going to allow you to make a really fine line. So let's take a look at a pencil in a pencil sharpener that's been sharpened by a pencil sharpener, of course. Now, yes, somewhat sharpened, and you can still see the tip of the head is rather flat. The problem with many pencil sharpeners is you can see how the wood itself is not completely even all the way around. That's with some pencil sharpeners, and you're going to get that. Sometimes you have to spin it in order to create that, but you can still see the tip of that. Well, let's see, can we get that any sharper? We can, by using an X-Acto knife. This is a sharp pencil. Now, using the X-Acto knife, I have to warn you, it takes some practice to get to that. It takes some practice to be able to use an X-Acto knife or a box cutter. And you're going to have to use that with a lot of caution. But you can see the differences between the three pencils. Sharp, medium, dull. We always want to keep our pencil as sharp as possible. But for you beginners, just stick with the pencil sharpener and just stay with that for now. We'll get into other stuff later on.
All right. When we're working, let's get some lights on here. When we're working, we want to make sure that we are completely perpendicular to the picture plane in which we're using. For time purposes, I've already set out my paper here. Now, what I've used is a T-square. Now, this T-square here is a metal T-square, which is basically used for cutting mats. I'll be showing you how to use other tools and the differences between a wooden T-square and this one, and the purposes between the two. For now, this is utilized very well. You can take your image here, or take your T-square, place it along the edge, and slide this up and down. This is going to give you a perfect perpendicular and parallel line to line up your paper. You'll line that paper up, set that up here, and then of course you will now set your image down onto your drawing board or your drawing table. But as of today, we're not going to be using the T-square for anything such as perspective. That will come out in another episode. Okay, we've gone over our pencils. We've gone over what to look for and how to keep the pencil sharp. It is extremely important to keep that pencil sharp as we're working. You'll find that you'll want to have a pencil sharpener by your side, utilizing that quite a bit. Second part is your posture. I have seen students drawing time and time again like this or like this. How's it going? No. We don't want to be drawing like this. The rule of thumb is we want to at least keep one arm's distance away from the paper. This way we have a full view of the picture plane. Our peripheral vision is seeing the whole image as well as right where we're drawing. We want to be able to see the whole landscape or the whole picture plane that we're using at this time here. So what we want to do is we want to keep our back straight. We want to keep our image straight, directly perpendicular to our picture plane here. Let me demonstrate. If I'm going to make a circle, I can see that my circle is pretty much round. It's not a perfect circle, but I can see that I am looking at the center and getting a pretty good image of this. So you can see I broke the tip of this here, and this is why because you're gonna be using this pencil quite a bit and pushing down, you will probably snap that off. If I lay my head to the side, such as this here, what looks like a perfect circle at this angle is actually an oval. It distorts. I had a student in one of my classes when I was teaching in middle school, extremely gifted, extremely talented. I could never get him to stay perpendicular to the image. He would always drop himself to the side. And when he drew images, they came out rather crooked. They looked like the person, but they were distorted because he was drawing from the side. This is what's going to happen to your images if you find yourself to the side. For those of you who've already picked up this bad habit, it's going to take you a little while to be able to get back into being right on top of your image. If you're just starting, you're ahead of the curve right now because you won't develop these bad habits of working from side to side. Rather, you want to stay nice and straight, looking at your image, keeping yourself here right in front of your picture plane. How do I make these perfect circles? Well, it takes years of experience. There are exercises that you can use, and I would challenge you to try these every once in a while. You don't have to do them every single time you're drawing, but practice them every once in a while. The foundation of drawing is working on the basics. Michael Jordan, who's probably arguably one of the most, or the greatest basketball players in the NBA, was asked in an interview, how often do you practice your shots, your signature shots, where he seems to be floating and suspended and defying gravity and making these long jumps into the basket? And much to the people's surprise, he says, not much at all. What I work on are the fundamentals. Shots from the free throw line. Shots from outside circle, half court, different positions of all the basics. To understand the basics and to work on those basics will allow you to be able to do the more advanced techniques that you're going to be able to be taught here. So constantly practicing on these will help you and benefit you to work better in your skill. As I said, think of playing a sport, a swimmer, the mechanics of swimming, the physics that goes into swimming, track and field, soccer, any of these sports. Even curling. There is a physics to understand, style, technique, and form. Before you can gain speed, before you can think of speed, you have to think of the technique that you're working with. The same thing in the arts. Think of all the basics. So how do we start? If we are working directly in front of the paper, as I said, it's very, very important. These are called circle drills. And these circle drills keep your hand loose and free. The idea of this exercise is to try to keep those lines straight and even as possible. Practicing how to do these circles will also keep you from doing this, which I call chicken scratching. Chicken scratching comes from a person who doesn't really know where they're going, so they make little lines because they're very tentative of where they're going. That's nothing. You need to make one continuous motion and working on what you're doing. This here is somebody who doesn't really know where they're going or have no direction of what they're doing. Lack of exercise, as you might say, or lack of training. Another exercise which is used, which will help a lot, and I hear this all the time. I can't draw a straight line to save my life. Well, neither can I. And most artists don't. They don't have that skill to draw a straight line without a straight edge. We don't call it a ruler. It's called a straight edge. We'll get into that later. So how do we practice? We practice, first of all, by keeping the hand pliable. We don't use the wrist as a fulcrum. We use the elbow as a fulcrum. We keep the wrist loose. Keep the loose wrist. That's really good. We keep the wrist relaxed. Most of the turn comes from here, the elbow, which allows us, and of course the shoulder. What we're working at here is making lines straight across. If I'm staying straight across here, that's going to keep the line straight. Watch what happens if I use my wrist. I don't have straight lines. I have arcing lines. This is why we want to use the elbow and the shoulder as a fulcrum, straight across. Again, these are all baby steps. These are all at the beginning of what we are doing And see how I keep these lines? And you want to stay relaxed. These are exercises that are used that my father taught me, who was an illustrator himself, and showed me how to work and practice and practice. At an angle, the same thing. We come at an angle, and I keep my shoulder, which is where the turn comes, as well as the elbow. If I'm coming down at this angle, I'm pulling toward me. Remember, the word draw means to pull. This is the reason why when they would have a showdown on Main Street in the 1800s and they would tell the other person, draw, it didn't mean to turn around and start whipping out a piece of paper and pencil and start illustrating. No, it actually means to pull. So that's exactly what they're saying. Pull. We are pulling toward ourselves, creating a straight line and trying to be as consistent between each one of these lines. Same thing with our vertical lines. We're going to continue coming straight down so that we have vertical lines on themselves. Let's see how well we've done. Well, if we take our straight edge, we can see we did pretty good here. Look at that. Not bad. They're not perfectly straight, but they're pretty well set. And again, this takes practice. As my dad used to say, practice, 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 practice. Here's the other thing. Practice does not make perfect. Practice only makes you better. There's no such thing as perfection. Get that out of your head. You can strive for excellence, but if you're trying to strive for perfection, you're going to end up killing yourself. I'm still looking at my work and going, well, that didn't turn out the way I expected it to turn out. People have asked me, and it's a line I've heard from someplace else, it's probably one of the best lines I've ever heard, was asked, what masterpiece have you created? And the artist turned around and said, I don't know, I haven't created it yet. It's yet to be done. I would say the same thing. Any artist is learning every single day, every single time they are learning. Let's go back to where we were. First of all, our tools. As you can see already, look at that. I've already worn that pencil down. We want to keep our pencils sharp. That's number one. We want to keep our posture perpendicular, straight back to the image of what we're working on here. Notice how I am sitting. I'm not hunched over. I'm not bent over. I'm not looking at my paper in this direction. I am simply sitting straight and looking at my posture and continuously looking at my whole image. I want to be at least 1 arm's length away from the paper. I want to keep my hand loose and free, relaxed. The wrist is not the fulcrum. The elbow and the shoulder are the fulcrum. You want to utilize the whole image here, which keeps your lines completely straight. You'll even notice I'm even somewhat rocking with my chest. You see, drawing isn't just in the wrist and hands. It's utilizing the entire body. Everything. You want to utilize that whole area of your body. You're calling everything into it. You're also going to see when we get into painting, you're going to see how I utilize my entire body. It's not just the wrist and brush strokes. Again, another thing we have to remember, there are no written rules in art. Art is very subjective, meaning that you can't compare a Picasso to a Cézanne. You can't compare a Cézanne to a Caravaggio. And you definitely can't compare a Caravaggio to a Masaccio. These are artists that are all throughout history, which we'll talk about later. Again, these are giving you a little bit of scope of what we're going to be working on so that you become educated in understanding everything there is about illustration, fine art, development of design, even interior design, fashion design, architecture. All of that is tied in, but it starts here. Let's move on. Okay, so what we've done is we've gone over the absolute basics of posture, tools, um, being able to utilize your entire body in drawing, and not just the wrist, but exercises that are going to help you get launched into working into a better illustrator or working in the arts and understanding that. And these are things that they don't talk about in public schools and even private schools. Again, art is more like enrichment in their eyes, and it really isn't. There's a lot more to that, and that's what you're going to learn here. Remember, in order to get to images of, dry media such as this, or images like this, you have to work the basics. These are images which are exercises of the masters, and which I even practice with, as you can see. Because just because you're working or you've gotten to be more advanced, it's always good to keep working on the fundamentals. Now remember, hit that like button, subscribe. There's a lot more coming into this than just drawing. We will get into wet media such as oil painting, acrylic, the differences between the two. But right now we have a lot to cover in just drawing. And this is going to help you later on in your art career, or even beginning to where you're heading off. Well, this is Arnulfo Jacinto, the professor, as you would call me, I guess, signing off for this episode. Next episode, we'll be talking about tools of the trade, pencils, illustration board, illustration paper, drawing boards, the whole gamut, so that you have a base of what to work with. And we'll keep building on that. So again, hit that like button, make sure you subscribe, and remember, may the Lord always be with you. Take care now.
Pantalabamba!